do that. Okay, so we are here to talk about Collegiate Overwatch. And you guys know I don't really hide my rankings, so my rankings are pretty much immediately up here for you to see. The only school that should be up here that is not is Mizzou, and Mizzou belongs in this tier. I'm sorry, I don't have control over this tier list. The one I make is on the other site, and it won't let me log in anymore, so I'm using someone else's tier list, and rather than taking ownership of it, meh, they haven't put Mizzou in the collection of schools I can pick from. I'm not shorting you though, Mizzou. Mizzou, you belong in this tier. So, what are we looking at here, and why is Collegiate Overwatch worth talking about? It's been like a month since ABC, the biggest tournament that has the most weight, ended, and we know what things looked like then. Why do we care about this? Why are we looking at any of this anymore? Well, there's a really good reason that we're still looking at this, and that is that we've seen some big shakeups happen. I should pull this one over for my list as well. Collegiate, this was the big one. ABC, we see it here. They go ahead and call it homecoming for the season that happened. Ended almost a month ago at this point, and we see who won was Northwood. I can do the refresh there since it's yelling at me, but that doesn't really change anything. Northwood won, Fisher got second. Why does anyone care? Well, we've actually had meaningful Overwatch happen since then in some of the third-party tournaments that aren't as important as ABC. Your ABC ranking, don't get me wrong, is the thing that people are mostly going to rank you over, but we do look at the totality of collegiate Overwatch. So what are some of the other big events that happen in Overwatch, and did they happen? Well, one of which is NACE. NACE playoffs are happening now, almost wrapped up here. What happens for NACE is they effectively snake seed by region. You get multiple regions. Winner of each region gets into the playoffs, and then second and third from each region go into a last chance qualifier bracket, try to get through there to make it in. That has mostly happened. They got their top 16. There's also NECC, which is a pain to pull the stuff up for. Their website still has problems, so I don't have that pulled up, but we do have some results from that to examine. And then finally, we have the University of Kentucky LAN, which had both its qualifier. A lot of this happened during ABC, and then it had its invitational, which was based on the qualifier, as well as some of the top teams directly invited, as you can see for Maryville and Fisher Wisps here. I suppose not just top teams, they also invite themselves, but they invite themselves with the bottom seed and they're hosting. So we can deal with that. And this is, now that Hugh is gone, this is the biggest LAN, I would argue. I suppose you can still say, oh no, there's other ones. There's other ones with qualifiers. This was the biggest LAN that happened this last semester. I can say that. This is definitely one of the biggest LANs in Collegiate Overwatch. Good on them for sort of picking up the mantle, turning it into something great. The level of competition here, even higher than last year, and last year was pretty good competition. And you can see again when we look at these qualifiers, there were good schools that didn't make it. Like if we look below the qualifying line, schools that are still good that didn't make it, Missouri, Bellevue, those are certainly both schools that people should recognize. Blinn is all right. Cincinnati's lead team is okay. Columbia International, okay. Ohio's main team, looks like there didn't make it. Ohio's not as good as they have been in the past, but still, these are all recognizable teams that didn't make it, and these are all pretty good teams that did make it here. A&M Maroon, maybe a little on the weak side, but still perfectly serviceable. That's a top 40 team. Illinois Wesley, they made it. Georgia Tech, Michigan made it here and made it into ABC playoffs. Kennesaw has been good in the past. Are they good again? Well, they made it through here. Obviously, matchups matter a little bit. So that's why we're still talking about collegiate. So you guys can see my rankings here, and why is there any sort of mix-up? Like, do we care about anything that's happened at the top? We do, actually. There's been some interesting things that have happened here. So we have Northwood here, and Northwood won ABC, and so they should be the top team in collegiate. I've got them as that, but they have actually taken a loss since then. Fisher Wisp did beat them, I believe, in NECC regular season. I believe that's where it was. But then we also saw a situation where we look at, let me pull up Kentucky here, and our Invitational, and we can see the final match here. Maryville beat Fisher. So that still gives us mixed data where, wait a second, we had in ABC, we had the win Northwood on top, and Maryville wasn't even the second team. In fact, Fisher was the second team, and then we had Fisher beat Northwood elsewhere, and then in Kentucky land, we had Maryville beat Fisher. So it's a little bit of a mess at the top. I'm still pretty comfortable that Northwood is the top team. I look at that roster, I look at what I can sort of sense that they're doing, if they're taking serious matches more seriously, and they just don't really care outside of, the big end matches where money is on the line. So I think that's what's going on. I think the roster difference, now that they have a flex support that actually makes sense, really does make Northwood the strongest team. And when they want to win, when there's money on the line, they can mostly just do it. Is there some challenge from Maryville and Fisher Wisp? Absolutely. But this is the order I've got these in here. Yes, I know Fisher Wisp was second in ABC, and ABC is the biggest tournament. I am putting Maryville in that second place. It was a pretty dominant lead that we saw in Kentucky here, where Maryville 2-0'd them and then 3-1 to them. So that's dominant enough. It's on land. It was done twice. It's more recent. I'm going with it. Okay, but Fisher's win over Northwood is more recent. So doesn't that make Maryville the best team? Sorry, I can't do it. It still looks too much like Northwood is the best team to me when they want to win. Camera's pointing a bit high. Thank you. Let me adjust that down. Okay. So then we get to move on through here from this top tier. These are still the Kings. These have been the Kings for a while mostly. There was a question on Northwood when Northwood didn't really have a viable support line and they had good players, but they didn't have a good fitting roster. But this has mostly been who the Kings have been to pick from among for the entire season. But what looks a little bit different is in the past, maybe early season, we saw Bryant Stratton and St. Clair pick it up a bit, get up into sort of the upper part of the cluster, never king tier, but upper part of the cluster, and then fall back down. Oh, it was a mirage. Oh, they hadn't had good opponents yet. One was from a win over UC Irvine's A team, and turns out UC Irvine's A team wasn't as good as people expected it to be. Some things like that. They've worked their way back in. And if you're looking here and going, wait, why have they worked their way back in? Why are they this high? This tier has mostly been dominated all season by Boise, Fishermen, and Rutgers. Rutgers because last season they were just so good and they just made their roster better on paper. Fishermen because they challenged Northwood really hard at the beginning of the semester, and other than one slip up to UTD, have looked quite good, have potentially looked like the best team outside of the Kings, with the exception of Boise, who simply had the best Bastion player and looked really good. Boise probably was, until the most recent patch, I suppose 2 patches ago, but the most recent real patch, looked like the king of the non-kings, the team on the outside looking in. Team number 4 with Fishermen right behind them. Then the patch happens and maybe Fishermen slides ahead of them. Why are both of these teams now completely moved to the side? And what is Rutgers, who was the last team in that cluster, doing all the way down here in a lower tier? Well, now we get into some interesting things. So we can take a look over here at NACE, and St. Clair cannot be denied. St. Clair came through, and they beat Boise. And they beat Boise 3-2. That is a statement win. People were falling off on St. Clair. People said, St. Clair's not that good. Yeah, they beat Converse, but, they're not that good. Whatever. Okay, they can sort of fall. They're not really it. They just had a bit of a lucky run in ABC. No, that's a statement win. You cannot ignore a win over Boise. But if you do ignore a win over Boise and think it's one-off, you leave yourself vulnerable to taking a loss. You really can't ignore it once they beat Boise and then a week later beat Fisher. This is Fishermen. That's the team that is there. They've got their teams in different branches effectively of the competitions. But that's Fishermen, and that's another win by St. Clair. So St. Clair very clearly belongs at the top there. Cannot deny them. They just beat, the 2 people that were effectively in that spot in the top of that upper cluster, going, we're the teams that can maybe catch one of the Kings if they slip up. St. Clair just beat 2 of them. They still have their grand finals match to play against Maryville. NACE is single elimination, so we won't get to see more sorting among these teams that have lost. It's just Maryville and St. Clair left to play at this point. Noxious is a demon. St. Clair has some talent. St. Clair has some mechanical talent on that team. Um, yeah, yeah, they do. So, they had the sort of thing of do they really have a flex support with Razor sort of thing, but Razor seems to have embraced that pretty well and been playing that role perfectly fine. Um, that in theory would have been the weaknesses of that team would have been, oh, maybe Squeak, their main tank, can't quite keep up with the rest of the team, was sort of a thought that people had. And, oh, maybe Razor isn't going to be good enough at flex support. Neither of those have really proven to be true. That team has done phenomenal. They had a little bit of a slump in the middle of the season, but they started the season very strong, and now they've finished the season better than I think anyone could have expected. This first season, this fall season that we're looking at here. So then the other team that I have up there that may surprise some people, and the evidence isn't quite as strong for, is Bryant Stratton. Bryant Stratton, we can see beat UTD. Okay, we can also see they took down Akron. That's a free win for teams at this level. Sorry, Akron. Um, and then they did get two maps off Maryville. I don't really judge teams based on maps. I really don't. I don't put very much weight on it at all. There's too much fooling around among the top teams before they're forced to get serious. There's too much randomness. Until you actually drop the match, the team hasn't lost. So I really don't put very much weight on maps, but it's a tiny bit of an asterisk if it's like, okay, I noticed this. I put very, very minimal weight on it, but I noticed this. And if we also look at how they did in ABC, we can see they they did well. This was sort of the Swiss stage that we're looking at here. They got a very high seeding, and that very high seeding, it did lead to a little bit of an easy path for them, no question. But that easy path for them, and again, this is like a month ago at this point, let them go ahead and get pretty deep in here to we see where they finished, and wait a second, that's pretty good. Sure, they lost out on the previous patch to Fisher Wisp and then Boise, but they did finish what, top 8 there. That's definitely not something we can top 6 even. That's definitely not something we want to write off, even if, yeah, they got a little bit of an easier path. They did have to beat UCI, that's UC Irvine's second team, which is better than their first team, actually beat their first team in the final round of Swiss, who earlier beat St. Thomas, and they beat Utah. So okay, this side of the bracket was definitely a little bit less proven than the other side of the bracket in ABC, but hey, they did go deep here, and then, hey, they did go deep again here over in Nace. They don't really have bad losses. So I am now going to, yes, go ahead and put them up in. I am now going to go ahead and put them up here. And should I maybe flip these guys like this? Yeah, I could do that. Actually, I probably should do that. I'll go like that. That's perfectly fine with me, though. We look at that, that's good. Oh, but they lost to Fisher Wisps in Boise earlier. Yeah, they lost to Boise on a different patch when Bastion was stronger. Boise just lost to St. Clair. I don't think so. I just don't think so. I'm looking at this, and again, it's a very minor thing. I'm not putting very much weight on it, but that was a close game versus Maryville. This looks like these two are in it. They're real. Maybe it's a mirage, but this looks like it. Then I don't think Boise and Fishermen need any defense at this point. They've performed phenomenally all season. Obviously, we moved away from Bastion a little bit. Not as good news for Boise. For a while, it looked like that was going to put Fisher ahead, especially after St. Clair had beat Boise before they'd beat Fisher. It looked like, okay, maybe Fisher's the king team. The only thing that had sort of stopped them from being there was the University of Texas Dallas that they lost that they took earlier in the season. But then once St. Clair also beats Fisherman, I'm reverting back to this order. I'm reverting back to this order because this is kind of how they were sitting previously, and the thing that bumped Fisherman up ahead was a loss that then Fisherman took the same loss on. So that's where we are. This is a little bit of a question mark. This is UC Irvine's second team. I like UC Irvine's second team. I like, that's cool. I like it. There's no new data on them. I don't think they've played in anything. I know sometimes there's like California Cup stuff or UC Cup stuff. If any of that has happened recently, I didn't see it. If anyone does know about anything that's happened, absolutely throw that in chat. Or if you guys want and are a part of the scene, you can ping me on Discord and I will probably see it and maybe we'll hop in a call. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. But we see that we haven't really had anything that they've competed in since this. They did well in this. It's in ABC, it's hard to really lower their rankings too much when they're not competing in things. So that's why they're sitting where they are. Could they go a little bit lower? Yes. Is it entirely possible that some of these teams are better than them? Absolutely. But they played on that softer side of the bracket. I'm saying softer side of the bracket in ABC. And so this is sort of what we've got. Okay. Then we move on to Illinois Orange. And Illinois Orange, I don't know, maybe a month ago, I'd have had at the lower end of the cluster. And the reason I'm calling this the cluster, by the way, is this to this has mostly looked like chaos where anyone can beat anyone since ABC playoffs. ABC playoffs, we had a pretty good feel for what the order of the teams were, but then we had some chaos, and I'd say that chaos was been caused by a couple things. It obviously was caused by St. Clair getting some upsets. It's been caused by ASU beating Rutgers when Rutgers was believed to be up like over here-ish, but then Illinois Orange and UST both beat ASU. UTD has the one win over Fisherman. You see how this has become a big mess of weight. It looks like anyone in the 4 to 15 spot can almost beat anyone. That's kind of what it's looked like. Converse hasn't looked super hot lately with their matches, but has beat some of these teams previously. So again, we look at this. Okay, fair. Navy, I suppose, doesn't have any amazing wins, but they have appropriately boxed out the teams behind them. So I'm going to leave them in here, but at the bottom of this tier. So that's why this is sort of the cluster. This is the cluster of the like actually competitive teams, I would put it. The gap looks to be much bigger between the Kings and the rest, the next, cluster of 12 teams than it is between this upper cluster and this mid cluster. That looks like a very small gap. There's a lot of mixing it up in here. But I sort of did just explain why these two teams are ranked next. Illinois Orange beat ASU, UST beat ASU. That's where we're going to put them. Hey, that makes sense to me. Earlier in the season, they've had wins, they've had losses, but more recently, that's what it looks like. But so is ASU just bad? Is that what it means? Well, no, because ASU strongly 3-0'd Rutgers. And is Rutgers just bad? I'm kind of thinking so. And I don't mean they're bad. Obviously, they're not bad. But again, they came into this season riding high off of definitively being the fourth best team, the uncrowned king, the whatever you want to call it, the only team that could pray to compete with these three teams here. They came out of last season being that, and they added Aiko, another contenders player, to their roster. They should have only been better, but they're worse. I don't know if their players are less dedicated. I don't know if, the energy is different. Maybe they're not scrimming as much. Maybe they're not just in the same mental place. Maybe they're not hungry anymore. But they are clearly not the team that we saw last season or even the prior season. They are not that. They took this ASU loss, and for a while I went, okay, well, should my rankings instead be ASU moves up and stays ahead of the two teams that beat it? And Rutgers is still up like here? Is that what it should look like? But I just can't do it. Rutgers has not put up quality wins. They even have a loss to Grandview. Now, were they running like 3 subs when they had their loss to Grandview? Yeah, they did have 3 subs. But I just haven't seen good enough wins from them. Like, they should be a team. Really, they should be a team that's up here. But they just haven't been at. Something mentally isn't there for them. That's not the level that they have competed at all season, and we're very much at the end of this fall season here. So there's no more proving time. They're going to have to get hungry, get it together, work out comm issues, dedicate more to the game in terms of maybe someone's got heavy classes and isn't really in it and is phoning it in a bit. I don't know what's going on there, but they may need to do some addition through subtraction or bring someone else in who wants to play more or something, because this roster should be better than it is. Okay. So then we move on to UTD. UTD has been fine this season. Their highlight is their win over Fishermen. They've traded with a bunch of teams in this tier here. I'm okay with where they are. Could they be a little bit better than where they are? Yeah, they could. But who moves down for them? Rutgers move down for them? I doubt it. Do one of these two teams move down for them? They very well might beat these two teams in matches. Like, if you have them play today, it's very possible that they win that match. But ASU did beat UTD earlier, and we look at this and go, these two teams did just beat ASU. I'm going to go with this. Again, these teams are probably all pretty tight in their competitive level. This team's a big question mark. Who knows where they go? They're just not competing in anything. But these teams are pretty tight in their competitive level. I say that, but we've seen some big one-sided matches, but hey, that's what happens in college sometimes. You're playing a regular season match after classes, someone slammed, they've got a project that is due tomorrow, they've got a midterm that they just came out of, whatever the case may be. There's always going to be some the college experience going on here, and it's great. Moving on, Converse. Converse hasn't super impressed me lately. That's why I've got them towards the bottom end of this cluster. They've beaten other teams in here earlier in the season. I know that they've beat UST previously in the season. I think UST is on a uptick. I think UST has increased their performance, has improved as the season has gone on here. I wasn't terribly high on UST earlier in the season. I don't think I was wrong. I think they got better. But you know what? Maybe I was wrong and they were just better and the matchups just weren't showing that. Regardless, Converse is not a weak team. No one should think Converse is a weak team for this. Converse has wins in here. That is more than we can really say about Fisher Navy. I think Fisher Navy, I want to say they have a win against Illinois Orange. I believe they have a win against Iowa State as well, who's, the next one down there. But they've mostly been losing two teams in this tier. And that's fine. It's Fisher's third team. Fisher has three teams in the top 20. Like, Fisher has three teams in the top 15. That's ridiculous. Fisher has, put something in the water for esports there. I know they haven't actually put something in the water because they're spread out and doing some online stuff, and so they're not all drinking the same water, but that's how the saying goes. Okay, then we move on here, and this is probably the end of the seriously competitive teams. I'm sorry, but it is the teams that are like, this is these are the teams that could have dreams of winning it all if they went on their training arc, montage, improvement cycle, whatever. This is probably what we are looking at because these teams have proven some ability to at least trade in the cluster. And if you can trade in the cluster, well, that's what you can look at. The teams that can really win it all are, of course, these three. Maybe if you're hanging out at the top here, maybe you can get the upset of a lifetime, whatever. But this is where the most competitive, I would say, not necessarily highest level, but the most competitive, most interesting bit of collegiate Overwatch is right now in this 3-2-15 spot. Not at all claiming that this isn't interesting. The top three here. The top three are very interesting, especially because now they've traded around wins within the last month, which very much makes it interesting. But this is also traded around wins in the last month, which makes it interesting. These guys have been trading around wins all season. It's great. So now we get into, okay, they're kind of just short of the collegiate Overwatch, the top of collegiate Overwatch. Like, yeah, they're interesting. We want to see who can make it in, but these you might call the bubble teams. You might call, they could get in if things broke their way, if they improved, but they're definitely not in the mix. You are very much surprised anytime you see one of these teams or below get wins over these teams and above. These teams mix it up with each other all the time, but if the teams below this line get wins over anyone in this tier or this tier, that is a head turner. That is, we want to be aware of that. That is also how you move up into the next tier. But you got to do it somewhat consistently. And what do I mean by that? Well, Iowa State has been consistent. Iowa State, they're at the top of this not quite there tier. They have been gatekept. They haven't made it in. They've challenged one or two teams in this tier, and I don't believe they've put together a win against a team in the tier above them. But they're flawless against every other team below them, including in their tier. So you look at that and go, okay, there's nothing else we can do with them. This is where they go. They've got a pretty good roster. They haven't been dropping to anyone outside the teams above them. They haven't cracked their way in there. But Iowa is sort of like the okay, you guys are dutifully doing the job, doing everything you should. You were showing, you need just like a parting of the seas, a little bit of a gap, a crack to get in there, a tiny bit better, a third of a step faster, whatever. But you're not quite there yet. Okay. Um, Okay. And then we look at that and we move on to this is, sort of that team. The rest of this gets a little bit more interesting where they've been more swingy. Maybe we'll look at the next two next. So Ball State and UCSD can both punch above their weight. They can both punch above this tier. They've proven that they can punch above this tier. We've seen Ball beat Converse. We've seen UCSD. I don't know if I can quickly pull up a UCSD win. UCSD not here, but UCSD was in here. Did they get anything interesting in here? No, because they went down in round one here. UCSD, everyone knows UCSD has the ability to punch high. UCSD got a ball win recently, in fact. That's not punching super high. Obviously, that's one spot above them. But UCSD, everyone knows, has the ability to punch high. It's well known in the scene. This season, they've been doing a lot more of the flopping and losing to teams that they shouldn't lose to. And I do mean teams down here and even down here and maybe even lower, and a lot less of the punching high. But everyone in the scene knows that this team can punch high. Ball State has punching higher. They have gotten wins in teams up in this tier, but they've also lost multiple matches to teams in a full tier below them. They, of course, lost recently to UCSD. They've lost to Illinois Wesley. They've lost to, I want to say, Mizzou, who would also be in this tier. I could be wrong about that loss to Mizzou. But we look at this and go, okay, they are not consistent enough. But they're going to live in this tier because they do have wins above them. And that counts for a lot. But unlike, say, a Fisher Navy, who blocked Iowa and, maybe has that Illinois Orange win and isn't losing to people down below, they are losing to people a tier below. So if you're losing to people a tier below, but also beating people a tier above, you're going to sit in a middle tier. You're not just going to live in that upper tier. That's mostly how that's going to go. UCSD, same boat, more extreme, less good resume. Less good resume in terms of they have even worse losses, I would say there. And I don't think this season they have as good wins, though we certainly know that they're capable of it. Grandview, Grandview, Grandview. So Grandview surprised everyone coming onto the scene with a win over Rutgers back when Rutgers was believed to be a top 7, maybe top 4 team, but Rutgers had 3 subs at the time. They then went on to play competitively with some teams in the tier above them and do pretty well, but then we sadly get, and I'll prove that. I'll prove that pretty nicely, in fact. Let's go over to our Kentucky here and let's jump to the qualifier for Kentucky. Let's go through here and we can see who did they play against. So they got through here and they got the third place. Remember, 2 teams got directly invited above them, but they got third place in the qualifier. They had to beat UST. That's a very real team. That's a team that's a full tier above them. They beat MSU, who MSU did well to get through Swiss, had a bit of an easy path through Swiss, but did get through Swiss in like 16th or 17th place in ABC. They beat Mizzou, who is a better team than the Okra committee realizes. They're a top 25 team, guys. They lost to Texas. They beat Georgia Tech. They beat Bellevue. And they beat Columbia International, and Columbia International is probably like top 40. Okay, cool. So these are things that we see, and then they lost to Fisher men here. Fine. We can see those are some pretty good matchups. Hey, you beat UST. That's pretty important. We don't want to ignore that. You beat Bellevue. Why does that matter? Bellevue's perhaps better than their results suggest, but though not amazing. Definitely not at the level their roster should be, but better than their results suggest. So you look at this and go, okay, yeah, Grandview, they do have a win over UST up here. They have performed. They have gone well. So why are they down here? Do they have bad losses? What's actually going on here? This looks like it should be better. This team looks like it should maybe be here, maybe even be up here, maybe even be up here. Like, what gives? Why is Grandview down here? And why am I even considering lowering them a tier beyond that still? Well, The rumor mill is that Grandview has lost one of their players, at least for the rest of the season here. Maybe that's not true, but that's what's in the rumor mill. But even if that's not true, we do get to look at the matches themselves, and we get to see for the actual land that happened, okay, well, how did Grandview do? Remember, they should be the 5 seed. They came in third place in the qualifier. 2 teams got invited into the first and second seed, so they should have a pretty good. Oh, what's this? They lost to Georgia Tech 2-1 in the first round. Huh. Well, Georgia Tech isn't bad. Georgia Tech made top 32 in ABC. Georgia Tech is actually better in not high end top 32, but Georgia Tech is, one of those teams that would have gotten votes. If we look at Okra, Georgia Tech would have gotten top 20 votes, not very many. I suspect they got just a couple, 20, maybe a 19 vote, whatever. And they are probably a top 25 team. Okay, but that's a bad loss. Well, was Grandview missing a player for this? I believe they were. I believe they were missing that player that is supposedly benched. But they have the loss, and it sounds like they're going to continue to have that weakened roster. So that's why they're not. That's why I'm considering lowering them even more, and that's why they're not sitting a little bit higher still with this, since people were curious. Cool. Then we move on to Bellevue. And Bellevue is actually one that I should get a lot of resistance for. Bellevue is one where people should be looking at me and saying, Temporal, why is Bellevue rated so high? Bellevue does not deserve to be anywhere near the top 20. Bellevue did not perform in ABC, and Bellevue missed big in the Kentucky qualifier. Both of those things are true. You'll notice we're going through here. No Bellevue. Page 2 wants to load. If it doesn't want to load, going through here, that's not good. And then we can look at our Kentucky qualifier, and they didn't make the LAN. How'd they do in the qualifier? They didn't miss it by like a spot or two. Missouri missed by a spot. Okay. They're all the way down here in 25th and 13 qualified. Bellevue missed big in Kentucky qualifier, and they also missed playoff qualifiers and ABCs. Why are they anywhere near the top 20? Look at the matchups that they had. Look at the matchups that this team had. I'm going to zoom in a little bit because you guys should be able to see this. The matchups that Bellevue had to get through here are wild. So Bellevue beat Blinn, I don't care. Beat Kentucky, I don't care. Beat Kennesaw. Kennesaw did end up qualifying, so maybe we care a little bit about that. Beat Georgia Tech, and remember, Georgia Tech A qualified and B beat Grandview in the LAN itself. Lost to Fishermen, but who cares? Beat Mizzou. Mizzou didn't quite qualify, but I'm telling you, as a top 25 team. Lost to UTD. Lost to UST. Okay, but St. Thomas and UTD, if we look up at what those teams qualified for, that's University of St. Thomas, fourth qualifier here. UTD, second qualifier here. Those shouldn't be disqualifying losses. They pulled these two teams after already having a loss to Fisher-Met, who won it. So they've so far pulled, they've had some good wins, Kennesaw, Georgia Tech, Mizzou, some good wins, and they've so far pulled 3 of the top 5 teams to qualify, 3 of the top 4 teams to qualify. That's wild that you're going to pull 3 of the top 4 teams to qualify. And then in their final week, because these were seeded 2 at a time, just like ABC has used to be done, they pulled Converse and Grandview. That's wild. That is absolutely wild. Like, they pulled 5 very good teams here, and you should not get that in Swiss. They just had wildly bad Swiss luck. They beat Mizzou, they beat Georgia Tech, they beat Kennesaw, and then they pulled 5 crazy teams. Yes, if they're as good as their roster should be, should they beat Converse? Should they beat Grandview? Should they potentially beat UST? Yes. Yes, they should be able to do all these things. But even though they're not performing at the level they should, this is an absolutely wild Swiss bracket to pull for a team that did make it. This is a harder matchup than anyone except maybe if we look up here. If you're winning, you're supposed to get harder opponents. Hard opponent, okay opponent, hard opponent, pretty hard opponent, okay plus opponent, hard opponent. This is an easier bracket than Bellevue had. Like, these are easier matchups than Bellevue had. UTD's matchup might be more equivalent. Fisher, MSU, Ball, Bellevue, Grandview, UST, Mizzou. Yeah, okay. So it was pretty equivalent to UST's, but UST went 9-1. Or not UST, University of Texas Dallas, UTD. So that's kind of silly, the level of bracket difficulty they got. That said, they haven't won anything. Like, Bellevue just hasn't won anything, so they're sort of getting a little bit of a handout to even be put here, but I don't have better choices. Why don't I have better choices? Well, we can sort of go through here. Could I move Georgia Tech up? I could. I could move Georgia Tech up, but Georgia Tech hasn't really sold me. Georgia Tech, they're solid. I like Georgia Tech. They're good, but we go through here. If we want to look at what their results looked like in ABC, we can see, okay, they lost to Northwood. No follow through there. They lost to Rutgers' second team. That's not Rutgers' main team. That's Rutgers' second team. Was this, a month plus ago at this point? Yeah. They lost to NYU. NYU's quite good, but okay, you lost that. They beat Columbia. They lost to Northwood here. But, NYU, when I say is quite good, they're not top 20 good. They're maybe top 25, definitely top 30 good. Rutgers Scarlet Rain is more looking like top 40, top 45, maybe top 50. They're not bad. For a second team, they're quite good, but they're not UCI second team good. So you can't have both of these losses. That's just not going to work. And but that was a while ago. Are they better now? Well, sort of. They're better now. But again, looking at their Kentucky win, they beat a weakened. They beat a weakened. What am I trying to say? Where is it? They beat a weakened Grandview. They didn't take down a full power Grandview. They beat a weakened Grandview. And then, okay, well, then they beat Miami, but that's fine. I mean, they're better than Miami, no problem. But then they got taken out by Converse. And Converse is, that was sort of what was expected to happen. So did they really do anything that is a strong argument for them to be up here? Not really. Could Grandview maybe be lower? Sure. Grandview could be down in the next tier. Maybe Grandview should be down here. Maybe Grandview should be down here. Maybe Bellevue should be lower. This tier sort of has accomplishments. They have things that they've done, but it's just not enough. The things that they've done are like, oh, you got a close loss, or oh, maybe Illinois Wesley beat Ball State, but can't repeat the task and has lost to people below them again, or all these sorts of things where you just look at this and go, these guys are falling short. UW, oh, they played UST close, but they still lost. Georgia Tech beat a weakened Grandview, played UST close, but still lost, sort of thing. Like these aren't gonna do it. So that's where we are. And then we rounded this out with the other, hey, these teams need to do something. They maybe got through, made a okay run in ABC, are reasonably good teams, our top 32 level perhaps, but I could put Kennesaw there as well. Our top 32 level teams perhaps, but they haven't really shown us any wins that put them on the radar, to be quite frank. Miami, Ohio got very, very close within a team fight to a win against Ball State in the Kentucky land, but that was when Ball State was playing without their tank. That's too much of a gap. So these are the teams that need to do something to even be on the radar. I'm sorry, that's just where they are. And if you're not on this, if you do not show up on this graphic and your team is not Mizzou, because Mizzou should be on this graphic in this tier, you're not in the mix in Collegiate Overwatch. And I hope I get some haters for that. I hope someone is going to come out and say, no, Temporal, you're forgetting about Team XYZ. They're the best. They're fantastic, etc. I guess I could put MSU as well, but MSU would be in this tier. I'm sorry, they're just not any higher. I really don't think teams outside of these are particularly good, threatening, whatever you want to put it. Are there teams that like have made playoffs somewhere, have done something that maybe like they're something because they won this lower tier in NACE or this lower tier in NECC or they got second in their division? Yeah, I don't care. I don't. I think these are the teams plus maybe Mizzou and MSU who I don't have tiers for that are potentially interesting right now. Blinn is not interesting. Please stop voting for them in Okra. Uh, Rebels are okay, but again, we're getting into a full tier down. They're just not going to be threats. Yeah. So, what do people think? Do people look at this and go, "Hey, Temporal, you're super wrong. Hey, Temporal, you've actually mixed it up. Rutgers is still very good. ASU just got one clean win over them. Or maybe ASU is better than Illinois and UST, but they just have particularly good matchups against ASU. Or maybe Paradox is over here going to yell at me that Chips is better than I think here. Or maybe Styx is in the mix. What are people thinking here? Just wait for Hog Meta. Hey, Muck. How you doing? Collegiate Lucio Ball rankings? Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Um, anyone here? No, I don't care about Oakland. I don't care about Shenandoah. Kennesaw, yeah, Kennesaw made it to this, and then Kennesaw also made it to Kentucky. I think they do belong in the mix, but I put them at the very end of the mix there. RIT just had a free bracket. Um, Akron is better than last year, but not as good as they were 2 and 3 years ago. Wichita, not real. Drexel, not real. Yeah. Okay. You're good? I'm glad to hear you're good. Are you guys ready to put something on the board to make me move you up a tier? The fact that you made top 32 in a brawl meta was kind of funny when you're known to be brawl haters. It happens, man. It happens. You get teams that get identities, but they still find their way through. Talent rises. If your team is good, it'll do a little better or a little worse in a certain meta, but it's still going to find a way to roughly perform as it should. And you guys are sitting in an interesting place because as we head into next semester, when we've got ESC, you guys, have sort of been known as the fourth best team in ESC, but I think you guys want to challenge Miami, are ready to challenge Miami for that 3 spot. I mean, obviously you should aim higher, you should aim to win it, but I don't think Ball State and Northeastern are going to let that happen. But I think you're ready to be the third challenger in that place. Waiting for ESC? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, scrim strong. Water. Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool. Let me see if anyone's pinged me in Discord that they want to hop on or anything. No. No, they have not. So I think we are pretty good. And yeah, I'll go ahead and look one more time for chat. If anyone's got anything they want to get in there, throw it up now. Akron and Buffalo have whole new rosters. Well, Akron would have to. Akron's roster last season was super disappointing. I remember going into them and going, yeah, these should be one of the better teams in ESC, and being like, wait, you have 2 Grandmaster players, and the rest of your team is like Plats or Diamonds. This season, I expect them to be better. Based on what I've seen so far, I don't expect them to be actually in the mix. I mean, it could make the middle of the pack stronger than ESC was last season. Last season, it was top of. You guys were a pleasant surprise. You guys were a pleasant surprise last season. Like, oh, Ohio is real, even if Akron is gone. Obviously, Ball State had just upgraded their roster. Miami, Ohio, and us were, the old guard, etc. MU not looking too terrible. Okay. Just went through recruiting high school players from Ohio. Got it. Got it. Yeah, no, I like the ESC league. It's got some good competition in it at the top. We just want to see that middle build out a little bit more because it was sort of a very big gap after the fourth best team. And if we can see the fifth and sixth best team get better, as well as see those top 4 teams get better, that would be fantastic. Weren't even gonna have a team last year. Got it. Okay. Okay. Well, good on you for saving it. 2.5 Overwatch 1 peak coach went hard, I guess. Hey, that's how it works sometimes. The best coaches aren't always the best players. The best players are rarely the best coaches. You don't have time for the most part once someone gets serious about coaching to also spend the time to play the game well, since neither of those things actually pays enough money, so you need a third thing called a job. Okay, that's gonna do it. Been fun chatting with you all. I will see you in the next one. And if you guys like the video, put down a like. If you hate the rankings, think the rankings are right, think I've vastly misrated a team, particularly, I think there's gonna be some hot takes in the cluster here, and then there's always gonna be some hot takes in this range as well. Maybe someone's going to accuse me of being a Northeastern homer. And I'll tell you, I'm not being a Northeastern homer, because the level that Northeastern is actually playing at right now almost certainly puts them somewhere in this range, but I can't put them here on my rankings because we just don't have the results to back it. But that's what it would look like if I was going to be a Northeastern homer, because that's how we're actually playing right now. But hey, I will see you guys in the next one. Temporal out.